All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. I have a very special guest, Dan Taylor. He is a friend of mine. He's a business partner. He's a Keller Williams brokerage owner, operating principal, real estate investor, advocate, and voice of the people, all kinds of good stuff. So, Dan, thank you so much, man, and welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, man. Congrats on the success with the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to this, guys. I consider Dan one of my close confidants, and I consider him one of the most intelligent people I know. So I'm excited to be able to share him with you guys, the audience, and I know this is going to be a great conversation. So Dan, let's talk about your background. So I know you have a very diverse background. You did some stuff in radio and broadcast and legal, and now here you are crushing the real estate space in Pennsylvania. So let's talk about your journey, man, and how you got to where you are today.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the radio. So I started in radio when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
Been at about 25 years, and, I no longer do it, but it really helped shape who I am as a person and how I'm perceived in terms of my communications and the way that I'm able to express myself. Because in radio, when you've got a live mic, there is no redo. You're live and you've got to act accordingly. So what that's allowed me to do is be able to articulate information in a way that is palatable and digestible in bite sizes. Because, in radio, you've got 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds sometimes to get a message across. In addition to that, I did every single format in many markets. So I did rock, pop, country, top 40, adult contemporary. And what that, again, allowed me to do, and I didn't know it at the time, but it allowed me to not only be able to articulate a message clearly, it allowed me to cater the message specific to the demographic and the market and the audience, which, again, has proven extraordinarily useful from a business perspective, because you're always catering your message to the audience. It's always different, whether you're talking to agents, whether you're talking to leaders, articulating and really taking that message specific to the individuals that you're speaking to and talking to has been a big part of who I am now, and that, without question, has been a big help doing that. Additionally, I did do some legal work when I was in college, so I'm pretty versed in civil and tort law, and not only that, I also worked in hospitality management as a general manager for a couple of years before getting into the real estate space. But from a background standpoint, I'm a firm believer, and I talk to my nieces about this. I'm a firm believer that you need to try a lot of different things in order to find where your niche is and where your value is.
100%.
Yeah, because, too many people, I never was one to fall into this mindset of go to college, study for a degree, get a good job, and then do that for the rest of your life, because the odds are heavily stacked against you that you know what that is without experiencing different industries, different challenges, and different career paths. So I dabbled in a lot. I did a lot, which gave me a unique perspective that obviously has culminated from a business and entrepreneurial standpoint. But getting into real estate, I was in hospitality management. I started investing in real estate and buying foreclosures, rehabbing, flipping, stuff like that.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that too, because that's right up my alley.
Which inevitably got my license, and we can talk a little bit further, I'm sure, about what the progression was thereafter. But real estate is life, and life is real estate.
Yeah, so I want to bring you back. I want to bring you back to the broadcasting, right? And I want to bring you back to the moment when you were in the studio by yourself. And how long would you typically be on the air? For 2, 3, 4 hours?
Usually 4 to 5 hours at a pop. Yeah. And, it was everything from local to, the tough thing with radio, and it certainly isn't what it was 20 years ago, but the tough thing with radio is if there's dead air, if there's silence, if the music stops, people turn the channel. So you've got to be engaging. A friend of mine, he's still in the business, and we talk often about compelling content and making sure that the content you're providing is engaging and compelling, because without it, you lose your audience. And in that medium, you lose your audience almost immediately. The
So
minute they hear dead air, they go to switch the channel, and then
it's over. So what was the first time like, Dan? The first time that you were actually in the studio and broadcasting for yourself? What was going through your mind? Did you feel worthy to be at that point, or what went through your mind?
Absolutely not. I was 15 years old.
Oh my God! You were on the radio for the first time at 15?
I was
That's incredible.
Cool vibe in high school. I was a sophomore in high school, freshman in high school with working papers in order to get. That was my first job.
Wow.
To say I was underprepared was an understatement. But if there's anything to fast track you on maturity, it's the radio business. It was a smash and grab business. A lot of I would say thought processes advanced. You get a crash course in real life when you're in that industry. It's much like, I would imagine the acting side of things. It's very fast paced and aggressive. So I certainly wasn't prepared, but again, over time, it gave me the skill set I needed to grow and develop as not only a person, but also as a professional. And that allowed me to then expand. So I did radio in other markets outside of my local market. I did probably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say every single station in my market I was either with and or on air, which is no one, it's a very seldom thing. For instance, I worked for the second largest broadcasting company in the country. And when I was part-time in radio, I was the only part-time on-air personality in the country for this company that had a home studio. And I was able to broadcast. And, that's something I talk about. I share this lesson often, and that is there were full-time employees of the organization that had been there for 20 years that weren't able to get a home studio. And I say to people a lot, very few people recognize opportunity when it passes them by. Mm-hmm. And even fewer take advantage of it, right? There's that smaller subset that actually grab the bull by the horns when it's running by. I am a unique breed, and I try to find other collaborators like yourself. I create the opportunity. I don't wait for it to pass me by. And if it does, I'll certainly grab it, but I'm not waiting for it. I'm creating it and putting the wheels in motion. So for instance, that story about the home studio, that didn't just happen. I made the stars align. And again, the second largest broadcasting company in the country, to say to them, here's the need and here's my value proposition. And when some full-time producers and agents or not agents, but on-air personalities in the business couldn't get a studio, they called me and said, how were you able to do this? And it's like, you've got to cast a vision and then put the wheels in motion to get to where you want to go.
See, and now this all makes sense and it comes full circle because me and you have a lot of private conversations and a lot about business operations and strategy. Now it all makes sense. and I think that the other thing that you touched upon about you have to try different things. So I'm a firm believer of this, right? I've done everything from pumping gas, delivering newspapers, delivering pizzas, restaurants, UPS, Verizon, and now here we are in the real estate world. And I believe, and especially for those that are listening to this that are struggling or they're trying to recreate themselves, so they're trying to find what's actually their passion, because many people live in a world where they're stuck doing something they don't love and they feel like there's no way out. I think that that's a miserable existence, right? There's no reason why anybody that's living this or listening to this right now can't recreate themselves. And Andy Elliott, sales trainer that I think he's the fastest organic sales trainer on YouTube right now, just exploding. He talks about recreation all the time. And I don't give a damn if you're 20 years old, if you're 40 years old, if you're 70 years old. You can always recreate yourself. And there's nothing that says that you're stuck where you are today. So I wanted to hammer that home because I think that's a really key point to success and living a life of fulfillment when you get into your later years.
It's interesting you say that because I'll just add on to it. If you're young and you're listening to this, the world is designed to force you into a funnel. And, it's incumbent upon you to acknowledge if that's the right funnel for you. And if there's any apprehension to it, I gave this advice to my nieces, and that is that I firmly believe until you're 18 years old, someone is preparing and planning your day for you.
Amen.
And society wants is for you to then spend another 4 to 5, if some cases 6, 7, 8 years, having it done yet again. You get to pick your classes, but the time blocks are there for you. And the reality is, if you get to 22, 23 years of age and you haven't made any real determinate decision regarding your life because it's been pre-planned and pre-structured for you, that's a tremendous disadvantage for you as an individual in a competitive landscape. So if you aren't 100% sure that you are dedicated towards a career path, my strong suggestion would be to take a year off. When I did that, I took a year and a half off of college. I went for 1 semester for computer programming. I went for computer programming. It was the worst decision I ever made. I thought I liked it until you get into Java and C++, and then you realize just how mundane of a life that is. And for those who love it, God bless them. For me, it wasn't the right move. But had I stayed in college, I would have spent a ton of money and a ton of time chasing a career that I never would have actually wanted. The challenging thing for me, and I'm blessed looking back, is I was able to step outside of what everyone was telling me. Everyone was telling me, don't leave college, don't drop out, you'll never go back, you need to stay the course, what are you going to do with your life? You don't want to be a bartender forever, you don't want to do this. What I did with that year and a half is what changed my life.
Wow. I'm so happy this came up, man.
Well, and I'll share this story. I met with the counselor at the university, and he said to me, he goes, they don't pay me to give you this advice, but I feel compelled to tell you that if you aren't passionate, you should go find out where your passion is. And he said, just don't tell the administration that I'm telling you this.
You should send that person a thank you note if they're still there.
It's a true story because it was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. And it was in that year and a half. I took the second semester off and took the year thereafter off that I started discovering life. I bartended casually 3 nights a week or so. And outside of that, I lived at home. I studied life. I just took a study. And what I ended up doing naturally, and this is what I mean by taking that time to figure out your day and your interests, naturally, I was driven towards politics, political figures, leadership, business, wealth building. So I started reading autobiographies of presidents, past presidents like Lincoln and Reagan and some of the most influential leaders in the world. I started reading business books left and right, everything from Who Moved My Cheese to Think Rich to Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I that's where I developed my passion, is in those books. That's where I got a fire. I wanted to continue learning. It wasn't like looking at a C++ book and dreading the next chapter. So again, just to dive into that, but I say to people all the time, unless you know what you're doing, take the time to step back and then see where you naturally gravitate without forcing it, because too many people force it and live a miserable existence as a result of it.
That's incredible, man. And we have so many similarities that I didn't even know, because I kind of had a stint like that too, where I decided that I was going to take a break from school. I went and I worked full time, but I also went on this psychotic personal development journey, and it was a full recreation. A lot of it was fitness based, but then it was the Think and Grow Rich. It was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was Matthew. This book changed my life. I hope I remember the name of the book, but it was Matthew Martinez. I think your way to 100 units or some kind of apartment building book. I need to reread that book. Totally lit me on fire, and it changed my internal wiring system. And then once that happened, it was just like game on. Just give it to me. So that's awesome.
To that point, I'll finalize this concept with, at the end of that year and a half, I knew exactly what I wanted. It was either I wanted to study political science and go to law school and be an influential figure there, or I wanted to study business and be a tremendously successful entrepreneur. So, that year and a half is what gave me the clarity I needed to make a decision for the rest of my life. And it's just, I'll tell this funny story. I called my cousin who's a stockbroker and said, hey, I'm thinking of going poli-sci business. And he said, I went for political science. I would have never gotten a job if it hadn't been the fact that your uncle's a stockbroker. So, that was the natural progression, and which led me to study finance.
Awesome.
So I can get to money. So,
and I just looked it up too. I would highly recommend you guys order this book and read this as quick as possible. What is Investing in Apartment Buildings, Creating a Reliable Stream of Income by Matthew Martinez. So I just wanted to share that. All right, so Dan, I think I have a good idea then how this led you to real estate, but how did you decide? So you were a real estate agent, you were selling a bunch of homes, but then how did you decide that your passion was to get on the leadership side of things and then eventually on the broker owner side of things?
So, yeah, I became a top producer. I was in the top 20 in my local association, rookie of the year, all that fun stuff.
Look at you.
Well, and I say this, in a lot of markets, you'd be amazed at, I don't want to say how easy it is, but how simple it is to become the top producer. If you do the right things and you're dedicated and focused on that, the results show up. And I think too often people get hung up in other stuff, and that's another conversation. But from a leadership standpoint, it's interesting because I had an idea you talking about that. And one of the things that I've always said, and that is that I don't truly believe that anyone chooses leadership. I think leadership chooses you.
There you go.
I've never said I want to be a leader. I want to be in charge of this, or I want to head this, or I want to grow leaders here. I've consistently throughout my life been asked to take on leadership capacity. And I think that's the definition and the epitome of true leadership, which is that you're not seeking it. It is seeking you. Your asset, your contribution, your value is so strong that other people gravitate towards it. I don't think anybody could sign up to be a leader. I think they can sign up to be a manager. But I don't know if they could sign up to be a leader. I think you have to intrinsically operate through the lens of leadership skills to some degree, and then build and develop those skills along the way. So for instance, I say that because in terms of my leadership capacity with an organization like Keller Williams and real estate, I was reluctant. I mean, I was a leader in my industry. I was a top producer. I was building a tremendously large real estate business. And I was reluctant as all hell to give that up to get into a leadership capacity. And I had a great mentor who coached and consulted me towards what the future opportunity looked like if you get out of the transaction and start getting purposeful and entrepreneurial. And, I'm very lucky to have had that, but it took probably 4 to 5 months of consistent dialogue and conversations to lead me to that, to recognize and see what they saw in me from a leadership standpoint.
This conversation's getting good, man. So obviously throughout the years, and how many years were you a team leader for of KW?
Give or take 5.
Okay, 5. Now operating principal owner. So let's call it about 6 years. You're rounding the corner on a decade, right? And you've coached, you've consulted, you've been there to pick people up. Let's talk about coaching for a minute. What's your style? What's your approach? And what have you learned from being able to coach so many different people and personalities?
It's a great question, because one thing that I've learned, and I have a phenomenal business coach that I work with through the Tony Robbins organization, and we've had this conversation frequently, and that is true leadership is adaptability. Every single individual that's in your life or is in your sphere or that you're working with to build a bigger life and a bigger future needs to be catered to differently. No one person is the same as the next.
Amen.
And the secret sauce of leadership is that there is no one size fits all. Having the skill set, the adaptability to navigate, one of what I share with leaders in our organization and some of the leaders that I coach and consult with is that you need to operate with nuance and grace. That's the true sign of leadership, because you can't communicate if you're speaking a different language than the person you're trying to connect with. So having that nuance to navigate empathy and logic, while also being authentic, I think that's the second piece of that puzzle. Is authenticity is absolutely key. Not telling people what they want to hear, but also doing it in a way that isn't offensive. You're not speaking down to people. It's helping them self-discover opportunity without putting it on a whiteboard in front of them. Right? You can lead a horse to water thing, right? It's giving them the skill set to realize and see what their potential capacity is without articulating it specifically for them. That takes nuance and grace. So I would say authenticity is a big aspect of it, recognizing that no one person is the same as the next.
Yeah, and authenticity and compassion, I think, are huge, especially in the current market that we're in. And I just had to have a really authentic and compassionate but direct conversation with one of our top agents, because they're not doing the level of activity that they need to in the current market. and we're going to drop this podcast. We're rounding the corner on December, and that activity is not going to be a fantastic outcome come 2024 if there aren't some serious and drastic changes made. So I love that answer, man. I think that is something that I need to work on becoming better as a leader. And I'm sure everybody else that's listening to this, you can also take some time to self-reflect on this.
Well, and to that point, I think it's important to understand that, obviously it is a journey, right? We're all learning and growing and navigating. But what I have come to find is that the people that need and want leadership and want to grow, acclimate to that, understand it, digest it, internalize it, and then implement it, right? The people that don't, but talk a big game about wanting it, will quickly self-discover that they need something more stable. They need something more specific. Right, leadership isn't easy. That's a misconception. A lot of people think, well, to be the leader, you get to make all the decisions. The reality is leadership's really hard. CEOs make a lot of money because they make a lot of really tough decisions.
Exactly.
Rely on. And it's challenging, and the mental turmoil and anguish that comes with that, and the capacity to handle that and then lead with poise and grace is something that, let's face it, your traditional 9-to-5 employee doesn't have to take with them. They can punch out at 5:00 and go home. And that is for some people. But what I have come to learn as a leader is that if you have direct conversations and you're authentic in that dialogue, those people will quickly self-discover that that's not a conversation they want to have.
And something that sticks with me, and a mentor of mine, Rod Cleve, he talks about this all the time, and I've mentioned it multiple times in the podcast, but everything that you want in life is on the other side of one hard decision. But also for leadership, a lot of what you want and the life that you're striving for, or the next opportunity, is on the other side of one conversation. One conversation that you're avoiding having because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or you're freaking out with anxiety and how it's going to play out. You just have to have the conversation, because I'll tell you guys from personal experience, it is not a good place to sit with stuff that that it's come time to speak your truth, and it's come time to step into the next phase of life. And now it brings us back to this whole recreation topic. So Dan, let's kind of pivot a little bit, and then I want to talk about the wealth building. I want to talk about the market. But the one thing I want to talk about, because I think this is also the secret sauce of a leader, this is the secret sauce of getting to the next level, is you're as calm and steady as they come, right? I know you can get fired up. You can really get the fire going and, want to run through a wall, but you're not neutral because you're an effective leader. But you're calm, you're steady, you're cool. How do you maintain that during the course of very tough conversations? And, look, people have personalities. We deal with 100 to 200 agents at any given day. So what do you do to practice that, or remind yourself that you need to stay steady?
So, that's a great question. I think my political understanding, in terms of what I had talked about earlier, watching great leaders like Lincoln handle those situations politically, and having to, he came under quite a bit of fire. There's no doubt about that. So taking lessons from historical figures like that. The other side of it is also, being able to, look, any leader that says they don't experience fear and or anxiety as a result of a changing dynamic and or changing industry is just flat out lying.
100%.
Right. The reality is you can accept it, digest it, and then use that as the ammunition and the fuel to you have to acknowledge it, right? Let's start with that. You have to acknowledge that that's a piece of reality and life, right? Otherwise, we'd all be robots. So you have to acknowledge that portion exists. But I think the difference is between true leadership and the lack thereof is being able to set that aside, acknowledge it for what it is, internalize it, and then say, okay, this isn't relevant in terms of moving forward. Because at the end of the day, the reality is most people don't care, right? The reality is the decision is what really matters that's being made in that pivotal moment, not the internal fear, anxiety, or belief system that goes along with it. And that decision is what's going to trickle down and have lasting effects. The feelings, the emotions will be, it's a spot in time. It's the decision that makes that has legs and will continue on. So in terms of poise, grace, and staying the calm in the storm, I have come to gravitate towards appreciating challenges rather than avoiding them. I think that's a big key aspect of leadership, is understanding that as a leader, your job is truly to handle challenges. The most leaders I know that aren't successful play in the, well, arguably, it's arguable if they're leaders, right? Because they operate in the realm of management, which is the let's do the fun activities, let's do the stuff that is easy, the stuff that is comfortable. And is typically those leaders that don't move the needle because they aren't willing to take on the challenge. They aren't willing to take on, weather the storm, if you will, and make the tough decisions necessary. Because let's face it, with tough decisions comes blowback, comes criticism, comes a lot of negativity at times, because while you may have the poise, the dedication, the determination to see it through, there are others that will cast doubt, will stand on the sidelines, point the finger, and say, this is the wrong decision, you're the worst. So being able to not only digest it and internalize that, but also understand in advance it's going to come and be prepared for it. So as a leader, that's what I try to do, is say, I'm going to make a decision regardless of what anybody thinks. I'm a very lead by consensus type of guy. I will certainly get the input from other leaders. I will vet my opinion and or analysis, but at the end of the day, I'm the one making the decision. And I will hear what others have to say on the conversation. But ultimately, it's being diplomatic, it's being structured, and it's being logical, because there's no emotion outlined on a P&L.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a logical document, as is a balance sheet in any financial, in terms of business. So business is a logical endeavor, and there's nowhere on the financial documents that emotion shows up.
This is why I'm so happy I do these podcasts, man, because I'm re-energized as a leader. Like, I got a shot of energy from this. So I really appreciate this, and I can't wait to go back and listen. All right, let's talk about the market. So we are currently in a pretty weird market, pretty challenging market. Many think it's going to stay status quo, or it could get a little rockier heading into 2024. So we've got high inflation. We've got inventory shortage / crisis. Commissions are under attack. We've got all kinds of craziness happening, right? How are you leading your people to get through this, to get out on the other side ahead, take market share, win, and still stay sane while doing it? Tough question, but
it is tough. But we operate as leaders, and our agents are leaders in the industry, and that's what I continuously remind them of is, you're with an organization that's focused on leadership. You've got leaders around you, and you are the beacons of leadership within the industry as top producers. So we see it as an opportunity. And that's, I think, what every leader needs to do in a challenging market or a shifting dynamic. And that is, for every agent in the industry that doesn't know how to handle it, doesn't have access to the resources, the guidance, the coaching, the consultation, that's a vast majority. That's the sad part of the industry.
It is. That
most agents are salespeople. They're transactional, and their next paycheck is they're going out and starting a new job every single day. But we coach and consult our agents to build a successful business with a platform of development, so that any challenge that comes their way, they're capable of handling. And I think, let's face it, with a shifting market, the market's been insane the last 10 years, give or take, right? I mean, it's literally historically unprecedented in terms of growth, appreciation, valuation, transaction count, you name it. What we have said to our agents consistently and repeatedly is, this is your time to shine. When the market shifts and times get tough, it is those, I don't want to say the bottom feeders, but I've said this consistently again and again and again. We're going to see a thinning of the herd in the industry, in the real estate space.
100%.
Good thing. I gave a presentation a couple of weeks back with our agents, and it was regarding the changing dynamics in the industry. And there was a new show that came out on Netflix regarding, I think it's something Planet Earth or something like that. But it says the challenge of survival, or the story of survival. Over 99% of all species that ever existed on this planet are now extinct. And it's a hard concept to wrap your head around when you walk outside and see that everything that's living, crawling, breathing is only less than 1% of all living beings that ever were on the planet. And wow. I think the lesson goes a long way, because the reality is adaptability and competing at a high level with a strong value proposition will never be a disadvantage. And that's what we coach and consult our agents to, is strong value proposition, articulate your value very well, clearly identify what sets you apart from just the guy that has a license. And I think we're well equipped for that. For instance, the offices that I'm an OP of, an operating principal, we're ahead of profitability from where we were last year. And the market,
that's incredible. Kudos to you, man.
And that's a testament to our agents, our leadership, and that's what we can hope to continue next year by driving our value proposition even stronger across both our company, our organizations, and our agents.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a fantastic answer. All right. So I want to talk about wealth building, my favorite topic and near and dear to my heart, and I know yours as well. Talk to me about your wealth building journey, man. You said that you bought foreclosures, you bought distressed properties. Talk to me about that journey. And what I would love to know is what triggered you to go down that path, or was there a person in your life that helped to light you up and get on that journey? Because the wonderful thing I think about what we're going through and colleagues of ours and people that we mastermind with is, yes, it's a challenging road. It takes discipline as an investor. But by the time that we're 10 years from now, we're going to be in a really fantastic place because we put the work in. So talk to me a little bit about wealth building.
So I would say for me, it's a two-pronged approach. My big, a lot of people talk about their big why and where that plays in. And for me, my big why is my mother. My mother is in her 70s now. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to raise 4 boys, which I still don't know to this day how she did that. But we never felt as though we didn't have what we needed and went without. We were always, we had a great upbringing. And, but the story behind that I really internally, understood and acknowledged was that it was a story of struggle, and she hid it very well. But looking back, knowing what a single mother has to deal with and recognizing the challenges that she had to overcome, frankly, on her own without much input and or support, it motivated me and instilled in me to never have to be in a position where I had to do that. And in addition to that, not to say my mother put herself in that position, but life circumstances. And one of the biggest saving graces for my mother was we lived in a 2-family home, and my mother always had that rent. So
there it is.
Was smart enough to know that to offset income and to get that support. So that was my first inkling into real estate, was seeing that extra paycheck come in every month to help subsidize some of the expenses that she had to deal with. So from that standpoint, I saw the hard work, and that's why I'm a hard worker. I am a servant leader through and through. I'm not the type of guy to say, I need you to do this, that, and the other thing if I'm not willing to do it myself. In fact, oftentimes my team pushes me out of the way because I want to experience it for myself in order to understand it deeply, so that when someone else is tasked with it, I understand the challenges, the nuances, etc. That's one. I'd say the other one is probably just that education I spoke about earlier. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich was the first book that really changed my life and my mindset.
Oh, yeah. For anybody that hasn't read that, go and read it this weekend.
Yeah, my favorite quote, that which the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. That's my favorite quote of all time from Napoleon Hill. And that's on the wall in my office. And it's something that I consistently, and it's the truth. It really is the truth. If you don't believe you can do it, you've already lost, right? So in terms of wealth building, seeing that rental income when I was younger, watching my mom work hard and recognizing what passive income could do to offset some of that hard work in the future is really what for me was the turning point collectively.
Incredible, brother. Incredible. All right, we're going to get ready to start to wrap up, but what I would love to know is, where do you spend most of your time in your day? Right. I know you do a lot of coaching, consulting, but how do you approach the week? How do you approach the day? I think this is very powerful questions to ask people like yourself, because it gives others who are striving to be in that position a framework. So I'd love to know your answer.
It's a great question. I will say nothing I do is perfect. And that's one thing that it took me a long time to accept. A lot of people talk about the perfect morning routine and this.
Yeah. It doesn't really exist, right?
Well, and the thing is I don't know if it's necessarily the specifics of the routine as much as it is the actions that are undertaken. So, I've got an awesome home gym, and I've got an exercise bike. And something I did just a couple of months back was I moved the exercise bike in front of my attic window, and I watch the sunrise every single morning. I've got
That's amazing.
sunrise, and it's like I start my day by watching the world start, right? And by doing that, and then in no particular order, I've tried to get structured order, I have to feel it. So there's meditation, there's reading, there's journaling, there's affirmations, there's gratitude. But I do it as I feel the need to do it. I don't say, oh, well, now's my time for gratitudes or now's my time for journaling. I'll do it. It's part of a collective morning routine. And again, sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's exactly what it needs to be. And sometimes it isn't. I'd say the most of my time is spent conceptualizing. And I think one of the things that I've really had a hard time with when I was younger, my early 30s, late 20s, that I've definitely gravitated more towards is getting leverage. My mind, my skill set in conceptualizing business endeavors, ideas, entrepreneurial initiatives is much better spent. My time is much better spent on that and developing that, implementing it and building it, rather than say cleaning or mowing the lawn or, doing, task oriented stuff. And that's something that I've learned consistently over time, is that those who exceed at a high level acknowledge that there's only so much they can do in a day. So I guess it's a two-part answer. What I don't do is a lot of what most people do. And that comes at a cost. But when you look at the development of business and the return on that investment versus remedial tasks and or daily routine, it, for me personally, is a win-win for sure on the direction of growth and development, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that the other commonality between high performers, especially those that came from very humble upbringings and were grinders and hard workers, I went through the same stuff, man. I mean, I started working probably from the time I was like 11 or 12 years old, actually maybe even younger, because a guy at my church used to give us a big bag of cans, my brother and I, to crush the cans every week after church. So we started doing that. Then we'd be so excited because it would snow. We'd go and shovel lawns. We'd cut grass. And then as soon as I could get the first job, I was like, sign me up. And I think that what happens is when it's not fight or flight, but it's like, damn it, I'm going to change, not only the world. I think that in our little way, shape, or form, we are impacting the greater good of the world. It just depends on how many people we can reach. But it's that I'm going to change the generations for generations to come. But what happens a lot of the time is you feel like you have to do everything. And I fell into that and, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And eventually you hit the wall. And even myself, I think I didn't give up cutting the grass until maybe 3 years ago, when finally my wife is like, what are you doing? Like, because I'd get home and I'm like, I still got to cut the grass. And then I finally started to give up little things, and then, the cleaner, etc. It just changes your world.
It's first of all, there's a reason we have a lot alike, and we're good friends, because same deal. I shoveled all the sidewalks in my neighborhood. I won the candy bar competition every year I was in middle school. I door to door. So you got it right. You've got to have the drive. And I think that's something, and I'm glad you bring it up, because it's something that is worth mentioning. And that is, I can't say no one, but it is incredibly seldom and rare that you have tremendous success and you grow a big business and or an entrepreneurial dream without being willing to put the sweat equity in. Like, for instance, I told you I bought foreclosures. I was lucky. I got into the housing industry from an investment standpoint. 2010, 11, 12, 13 is when I bought my investments. So the opportunity was ripe, but I'm also a licensed contractor in my state. I gutted houses and flipped them myself with a team. I was GC. I was electrician, plumber.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
The work myself. And what it allowed me to do was, one, understand and recognize I don't ever want to do that again. But more importantly, what it allowed me to do is have a much deeper insight into those skill sets, so that when I hired out for future projects, I had a very strong conceptual understanding of the quality of work based on what I had done and learned through that process. So again, especially in your 20s, if you're not willing to put the time in, grind, because every single grind you go through is a learning opportunity for you to leverage in the future. And not having that and leveraging it out on the get-go gives you a lack of understanding. So for me, real estate, both selling it, investing in it, and also now running in a brokerage and an organization in the industry, I have a very strong understanding of the product itself, which the entire industry is based on. And that's something I wouldn't give up for the world. That would be my payback for the sweat equity on the front end.
I love it, man. Well, look, we've covered basically everything that I wanted to cover. So I want to ask one final question, because I think that you're the right person to give this advice, is for the person that knows that they did not finish this year where they wanted to be, and they feel like they're ready for breakthrough. And now maybe they listen to this, they got inspired, or they listen to somebody else, or they're going to take our advice, read these books, become a student. What piece of advice would you give to that person to go through the recreation process and start to change the generational cycle and really build some wealth?
I'd say without question that the most important thing is to know where you're going first. If you don't know where you want to go, you can't put a plan together on how to get there, and you can't start that plan. So a lot of times people have an understanding of either a dollar amount in income and or a perfect life, but there's no real strong conceptualization of what that actually looks like, and then a measurable. I'm very big on logistics, and if you don't have a clearly articulable plan and strategies to implement to get there, you will never get there. We all know that person that says, "I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this." So for somebody that didn't get to where they wanted to go, I would challenge them to say, what was your goals? Did you set them clearly and were they attainable? And if so, what were you using as a measure throughout the way? What were your milestones to track your progress? And if you had them, which is another step ahead, did you actually measure where you were against it and then course correct accordingly to get there? Because that's one thing I see is we do business planning as agents and organizations every single year for our teams. A lot of people set a business plan in the fall and then never look at it again until the next fall. And the question is, if you're not holding yourself accountable, that's the double-edged sword of entrepreneurialism. Everybody thinks, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I get to do my own thing. Well, you are also accountable to holding yourself accountable, which is almost an oxymoron, right? Like you have to understand that the tough conversations need to come from you. And if you aren't willing to have those tough conversations, hold yourselves accountable, and then set that standard, and I don't mean to be cruel to say this, but you operate from a victim perspective. You operate from scarcity, which is it's not fair. You will look for every other reason in the world to ascertain why you haven't been successful. And when the reality is you're the reason you haven't gotten to where you want to go. And the minute you understand, digest, and accept that is the closer you'll get to where you want to be.
Woo, that was good. All right. Let's put a bow on it right there. So, Dan, for anybody that wants to reach out to you, connect, they want to join the company, they want to, pick your brain, provide some value, vice versa, how can they reach out and connect with you?
You know what? My general email would probably be best. Phone calls are tough and the texts are tough. Agent Dan Taylor, AGENT Dan Taylor @gmail.com. Any inquisitions or any challenges, insights that I can provide, I'm always happy to.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for coming on today. I know that you're going to change some lives with this episode, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.